what I said. He didn't put Dale Earnhardt in there.
That's a heavy hitter right off the rip.
I feel like they're all heavy hitters, but
gotta keep the people involved.
Yeah, gotta keep the people happy.
Right, yeah. So the reason I started...
I heard some of the stuff you guys were saying. Dan, I would say that right off the rip, I would say that your opening remarks about this indicate already who the GOAT is in this matchup. It's what you were saying, what this generation, the closest thing we had to Michael Jordan. The closest. He didn't reach it. I would venture, and going back to what you guys were saying before, I would say that LeBron James is the greatest high school player to ever come straight out of high school ever and make that dominance apparent immediately. Okay, and he is, in my opinion, one of the top 5 players ever to play the game.
I mean, to counteract your point about the coming out of high school, Dwight Howard and Kobe Bryant also made very quick impacts.
Not as much as LeBron did, like you said. LeBron was carrying a team that was crap. Okay, Kobe and Dwight. It took them a while to get success, and they, I think Kobe averaged maybe 18 points a game his rookie season. LeBron James came in dominant. It was because of his size. It was because of how agile he was. He was, at the time, with Dwayne Wade and Carmelo Anthony that came out, he was the closest thing we ever saw to Magic Johnson at the time. Dwayne Wade at the time was very reminiscent of Jordan in the style of basketball that was being played. Now, when we're talking about, how much LeBron has accomplished in his career and how he surpassed certain aspects of Michael Jordan, we also have to understand that Michael Jordan accomplished these feats in a shorter amount of time with a nice little baseball break in between. So even without that baseball break in between, and let's say they didn't break up the team in 98, we could have had 10 championships in a row easily. And that's going back to what you were just saying about the Utah Jazz, in the fact that even in the second year they played them, and that the Jazz were a better team, the Jazz were also the oldest team in the league. And that, with that being said, if the oldest team in the league was playing the Bulls, who was probably in the top 4 of the oldest teams in the league, if not the top 2, probably the second oldest at the time, we're looking at a team that was still that dominant, even against younger talent at that time. They could have easily won 2 more. Easily.
You're right.
They were kind of, it was definitely after 3, it would have been hard to probably go 2 more, but I think it was doable. With the dominance that they had, it was doable. The talent that they had, who they could have picked up, in free agency and let people go, we don't know. But I do think that they could have kept the core 3 together and gotten at least another 2. And Jordan, having, Pippen and having that camaraderie of the team, even, learning about it in The Last Dance, there is definitely, comparisons to LeBron James and the fact that they bring out the best in players and even the B, C level players, come up a whole grade. You got a C player playing like a B, you got a B playing like an A. And that was what they did, because they were that passionate about winning that they pressed that even in practices. He punched people in the face.
Yeah, we discussed this a little bit. We discussed this a little bit last week when we talked about The Last Dance. Question I asked was, we all knew Scottie Pippen was talented. Was he made more talented by Jordan? Did Jordan just speed up his development, or did Jordan allow him to develop himself? And the same thing with Horace Grant. Horace Grant leaves and becomes as close to a superstar as you can get without actually being a superstar.
No, I think that their talent was very much reflective in their stats, and I think that Scotty's is probably a little underrated because he was, being a player under Michael Jordan, still having those stats, you have to think that he could have gotten more stats if Jordan wasn't there.
And he did when Jordan left.
Absolutely.
Just the team wasn't
Absolutely.
successful.
And when he went over, he played for the Trailblazers and the Rockets. He did better in the Rockets than he did with the Trailblazers. But that was part of his heyday, and a lot of back injuries and some other injuries he was going through. But just by sheer pay and learning about it in The Last Dance and seeing how much he was getting paid, where he was a top 5 talent in the league, but he was definitely not getting paid like that. That shows that Scotty could have held his own anyways. One thing I want to add is the fact that we talked about LeBron and who he had to face to go into all these finals. Oh yeah, is the fact that the teams Jordan and those Bulls had to go through to get to the finals. Those teams before they reached even the finals were not a joke. Yeah, they were loaded. Go ask Patrick Ewing.
The bad boy
Ewing
Pistons, the Knicks. Yeah.
Patrick Ewing's been dealing with him since he was in UNC. He was the demise of Patrick Ewing. Charles Barkley and Patrick Ewing never got championships because of Michael Jordan.
They're not the only ones. Malone and Stockton never.
There's tons.
Malone and Stockton never got one.
Nope. Yep. But when they had the 50th anniversary of the NBA, and you look at that list. Majority of the people Michael Jordan stopped from getting championships and the people that Michael Jordan went through are on that list.
Okay.
Well, I think there's another interesting argument, and I'm not sure where I fall on it exactly, but it's dominance versus talent around you. And Jordan was inarguably dominant, but I think the league as a whole was worse. Now, that doesn't mean he faced worse competition in the playoffs and finals, Eastern Conference or full on finals. But I think the league has gotten better. Statistically, there's tons of stats and tape to back this up. Players are getting better training, better nutrition, better workouts. And are starting earlier, so it's how dominant you can be, especially in your era. So it's an interesting thing because Jordan was obviously way more dominant than the people around him. There was no one really around him that was close to him. When he's in his absolute prime. LeBron is very dominant, but I would say he's not as dominant as Jordan was, but the talent level is also higher. So it's an interesting juxtaposition there.
I do just want to say, and this is going to be the last point before I ask Scott and Dan Beebe to join in. You say LeBron hasn't been as dominant, but LeBron went to 9 straight finals.
Yeah, but I just want to make a point about this too, though. It wasn't until the last few years do we know of workload management. Okay, when you're talking about talent in this league, I understand that there's great shooters, good defensive men. Okay, but when you're saying that the talent back then was not what the talent is now, unbelievably untrue. You're talking about full-fledged Hall of Famers. Any person that you name right now base their game off of somebody back then. You name someone right now, I'll give you someone back then, is that it's better.
You can say the same thing about...
That's fine. That's not the argument. The argument is league-wide, the talent is better. And that's not arguable. The talent from the base is better. No, it 100% is. Every player, on average, has gone up. And that's pretty much across any major sport.
That's workload management, what I'm talking about. Like you were saying, there's training and everything involved with that, but, these guys played through injuries. These guys, didn't have as much longevity because they didn't have the proper training that they have the technology for now, but that doesn't take away from their talent.
Right, and that's why it's an interesting dominance argument because, how dominant can you be when everyone around you is better, versus, your own individual level, and does that make you more impressive by your dominance because you're at that level when everyone else isn't? So I'm not falling on one side or the other. I am saying though that across major sports, players are better today, and you know that is 100% based off of where other players got and learning from them. 100%. That's not the argument. It's just that people are in these major sports better on average. You know, as I said, they're starting younger. There's you know way more science behind everything to get to that level, and it's based off of all these older things. So that's what I'm saying is not arguable. The argument is that dominance level is, you know, does that make Jordan better or worse? And I honestly don't know where I fall on that, because yes, the base is better, but Jordan didn't have what LeBron has, you know, around him as far as science, as far as load management, et cetera, and was still, you know, an echelon above everyone, whereas Jordan is definitely, where LeBron is still definitely dominant, but I don't think he's head and shoulders above everyone around him like Jordan was. So that's what the interesting debate. I think that's a really, like, you know, cool argument to be able to have.
It's like the same. It's the same argument from the get-go. It's the Michael Jordan, LeBron James thing. Because what would we say if Michael Jordan did have that technology right now? Like, if he had that technology now, then, or those athletes had this technology then, could we say how good could they have been then? Right. You know, then it comes down to talent.
Yeah, and Dan, just to go back to your thing about, you know, nine championships, I hate the amount of championship argument. You know, you've got guys like Bill Russell who had 11 championships, but he's not in this conversation because it doesn't. It's not the amount of championships you get. It's how good you are compared to the people around you. And yes, you know, how much you can elevate your team, it certainly matters at least in team sports. But I don't think it just comes down to ships. Right.
And in team sports, you're right. And I'm just playing devil's advocate. I hate that argument that, you know, let's say, for example, that Jordan is better than LeBron because Jordan's got 6 rings, LeBron has 3. You can't measure individual success by team success.
Right, because then, as I said, Bill Russell, 11. He's, you know, 5 more than Jordan. Oh, he must be the best ever. And
right.
I don't think,
you know, no one says that.
You can't take rings into the conversation. I mean, rings matter, but in the same sense, they're not all that matters. You're talking about somebody who's dominance. If it came down to the end of a game, who do you want taking the shot, or who do you want leading the team? At this point, the way that we're breaking this down, this is MJ and LeBron, and this is only the first of 16 that we ought to get through.
Yeah.
I'm not taking LeBron. I'm just not.
Okay, so let's hear from Scott and then Dan Beebe really quickly so we can progress. Scott, what are your thoughts on this LeBron MJ argument?
So I'm glad Dan O'Shea brought up Bill Russell, because I was going to ask you if Bill Russell was on this list, or is Robert Horry on this list, because he has 7 championships. He has more than MJ, but I'm assuming he's not one of the 16. Spoiler alert for listeners. I'm sorry, Robert Horry's not on the list.
No, he's not.
So the championships, to me, yeah, you got to take that out of the equation. To play devil's advocate a little bit more than you did, like, the whole argument here has been, you know, Jordan got all those championships. He faced tougher competition to get there. LeBron has been in the finals and can't win. Michael Jordan faced 8 Hall of Famers in his 6 finals championships, which is pretty good. And LeBron's finals alone, he's already faced 10 current or future Hall of Famers. So he's actually faced harder competition. You have to understand, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, those guys are going to the Hall of Fame. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, those guys are going to the... Klay's going to go just on his shooting alone. They put shooters in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that might be true.
Harden, Westbrook, those guys are going to the Hall of Fame. He faced Tim Duncan in the finals.
Dirk.
You have to remember, Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Kidd's already in the Hall of Fame. He faced him in the finals. So, he's faced 10 either already or future Hall of Famers, where Jordan faced 8. One of them being Vlade Divac, who all right, yeah, he's a Hall of Famer because of his contributions to his country, but he's not one of the greatest. He's probably one of the worst Hall of Famers there are.